Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. This will be the last Happy New Year for all of you new listeners in as we're approaching the end of January. Shout out to all the new listeners. If you are new, welcome in. Thanks for giving us a shot, adding us into your weight loss health journey. If you want to know more about our journey and why we do what we do, why we have the podcast, why we have our resources, our coaching programs, our challenges, etc., head back to episode 1. Give it a listen. Learn a little bit more about who we are and why we do what we do. Selfless promotion. We have a challenge coming up tomorrow for all you last-minute Larrys and last-minute Lucys. If that is your name, I just had to pick some L's, so no offense. I live in that category as well. About 40% of our folks sign up today or even tomorrow morning before the challenge. That starts tomorrow. So come on in. The water's warm. Going to be an incredible kickoff to 2025.
Yes.
If those New Year's resolutions and your plan for this year in terms of your weight and your health have already gone awry, come on. Come join the party. It's going to be a ton of fun. You can get the link in the show notes. And a final shout out to our OGs, our long-term listeners. We are grateful for you. Continue to like, download, share. If you've been listening for a while and you've seen some transformation, had some wins, shoot us an email, info@thefastingforlife.com. Drop us a 5-star review. Those are absolutely our favorite kind, and we are very grateful that we have hundreds and thousands of reviews in that category. So we're just going to continue to bring the value, and hopefully our goal with every episode is to give you 1 or 2 actionable things that you can do on a day-to-day basis to improve your current position for your long-term health and weight loss goals. So what are we going to talk about today, Tommy? So we're going to talk about an article that we saw called "Are Long-Term Fasts or Water Fasts Good for You?"
Okay.
Right? So we're going to talk about
subject.
Extended fast, 24 plus hours. We're going to talk about 48, 72-hour fast. We're going to talk about 3 to 5 day fast. We're going to talk about some studies that look at 10-day or 20-day fasts. And the thing that really caught my eye, and if you've been listening to our podcast for a while, then you know that we'll take research articles, we'll take headlines, we'll take, in the world of clicks and impressions and views, headlines or snippets from articles without context can be very misleading.
AI summaries.
Yeah, AI taking over the world. The robots, iRobot with Will Smith back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
That movie's horrible. I remember the couple that when I was running restaurants back in the day before I went back to grad school, I lived in a house with a couple other people in the restaurant industry up in down by the beaches in Rhode Island. And shout out Narragansett. And I remember we got like a snowstorm and we ended up renting that movie. And and it was back then you would order it like on cable, like Cox cable. So it was like $6.95 and it got like delivered to your box and you could like watch it. It was like cool technology way back in the day, right?
Yeah.
But he renamed that movie I Bleep $4 or whatever it was because he's like, that was the worst movie I've ever seen. But in the world of AI and headlines and all that kind of stuff, one of the things that stuck out was one of the quotes in this article about from someone that I follow. I've read his books from Dr. Peter Attia, that fasting should be done strategically, not too long, not too frequent, particularly in lean people, while fast lasting longer than about 3 days may occasionally be appropriate in specific scenarios. But what the quote or the outline was that Peter Attia says fasting is bad and he no longer does it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a correct interpretation there, but it does bring up a good point, which is that the longer we go out with our fast, the less frequent they're probably going to be really helpful, and then also the closer we get towards a lean maintenance goal, then the less the less the less desirable, some of the effects of those longer fasts are going to be getting into those higher levels of more therapeutic ketosis, getting into those longer fat burning ranges. I mean, that can be problematic if you don't have a whole lot of fat stores left to burn as you get leaner and leaner. So, the understanding that getting closer to the goal weight and to a leaner, healthy body composition means less need or less frequent, wanting or needing to do these longer fasts. That makes intuitive sense to me, and so I'm glad to see that's kind of the consensus that some experts are coming to, because from my own personal experience and with people in our coaching groups, that's absolutely the conclusions that we've drawn as well. I mean, I still love a longer fast. A few times a year, especially getting into that 5-7+ day range. I know you typically will take one of those out, every now and then as well. And so those can be really, really helpful, but yeah, not all the time, not every month, and not at a very lean body composition either. That can be problematic.
Yeah, and that was where it came from. His negative effect on muscle mass, right? And we'll talk about the lean tissue and the different percentages. And so you're saying about 2/3 of participants, because this is a concern that we hear, 2/3 of participants, 2/3 of the weight loss in lean individuals ended up being muscle mass and not fat mass. It ended up being actually a 60-40 split. And this came from an episode on the Metabolic Optimization podcast with Thomas DeLauer. And he used to do regularly complete 3-day water fasts once a month and up to a 10-day water fast 4 times a year.
Okay, that would be 40 days out of the year, so over 10% of his time spent.
Well, plus the monthly 3 days.
Sure, yeah, but over 10% that he's spending time in this 10-day fasting state. I mean, that's a lot, especially, I mean, he's an ultra lean, like almost competitive bodybuilding shape, individual, just about. He probably sits at sub 10% body fat all year long.
Yeah, even if he's in the 12 to 15% range as a leaner male, I mean, that's still like lean. Like,
right.
We don't need to be pushing the fasting window for those types of, or for those lengths of time. So
sure, it's not optimal. So hold on. Can we back
please
up for a second okay. So when you're talking about quote unquote muscle loss, because that's one of those headlines, that's one of those attention grabbers right there. But so if you dig into the cross-sectional data, when they actually take those muscle biopsies, or they take the CT scans, or however they're actually measuring it within those studies, and you look at it and you go, okay, did we have an actual muscle loss here? Was there muscle atrophy, or was there muscle dehydration? Because muscle dehydration should be expected, because if you're stepping into a longer fast, there's going to be some level of liver and skeletal muscle glycogen that needs to be depleted when you turn on that fast. And so you're going to have to lose water from the liver and from the skeletal muscle in a large amount. And that's only going to take, depending on what the previous few days have looked like, that will take somewhere between at least 8 and 10 hours and up to north of 30 to 40 hours to actually fully deplete. So you may not be seeing this actual like full depletion within your typical intermittent fasting ranges. But you start getting into a multi-day fast, you should expect muscle cells shrinking in size temporarily. And it could also lead to a temporary decrease in strength as well. So if you're working out during that time, you could feel a temporary strength loss as well, because the fuel just isn't as close to the muscle cell and it's not as readily available. But that's okay. That's a normal part of the glycogen depletion and repletion cycle, not muscle atrophy. And I feel like that's a big distinction that's not always made, but it's an important one to understand.
And that's that research article that, so his personal experience is where that conversation came from, right? Because he observed muscle loss about 10 pounds over 3 years. And that's where he was like more cautious about recommended fasting, especially for those lean individuals trying to gain muscle. For the rest of us, still trying to lose fat and optimize body composition, if you're doing resistance training, prioritizing protein, if you are going to do a longer fast, we'll talk about action steps for that a little bit later in today's episode. Then you're not going to want to be PRing your deadlift if you're doing a Volter Longo, reset once a year. Okay.
Sure.
So you lose that the cost benefit if you're not applying it in the right way. So the study that he refers to is a 10-day fasting study in healthy men where 60% of the weight loss was lean soft tissues, so LSTs, not fat-free mass or lean, but just the whole category of lean soft tissues, while fat mass accounted for about
just non-fat,
40%, right?
Okay.
As you stated, that included water and glycogen losses as well.
Right.
So he now says fasting may be more suitable for individuals with significant body fat to lose, as the trade-offs are beneficial. He says may be beneficial, but they are beneficial, right?
Yeah.
And here's a kicker to your point about the length of fast is the research shows that protein loss occurs early in a fast, but may decrease as ketogenesis increases.
That makes sense, yeah.
So this is the concept of fat adaptation, right? That your body now can flip the metabolic switch. It's glycogen depleted. It gets ketones up, and now you have energy to perform. So there's a study that we're going to do in an upcoming episode that it actually shows that physical activity did not negatively impact, combined with fasting, muscle function, and strength was maintained or even increased in some muscle groups.
Interesting.
So this is one of the things that we think about, because a lot of people, Tommy, will come to fasting for the autophagy, for the healing benefits, for the, I want to combine it with carnivore or low carb to reverse diabetes or psoriasis or an autoimmune issue, right?
Yeah.
But then there's this also this like metabolism autophagy component, right? So the autophagy with fasting, it kicks in, but then there's a point where it's like, all right, if you're using the fast to want to rotate through fast and build your, better food choices and a healthy lifestyle and get the majority of the benefits from fasting, there's no point in really going past 48 to 72 hours all that often unless you have a considerable amount of weight to lose.
Yeah.
Right? This autophagy kick-in point is interesting, and it's kind of a slippery slope because there was a study that talked about mice and their peak autophagy.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, well, at that point, like, why do we really need to even go that far down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, that's a great point. Because when we're aiming towards autophagy, which is it kind of talked about almost like the holy grail sometimes of like this cellular cleansing. I don't want to, like I've seen it almost described as kind of a fountain of youth kind of situation. But if you back off of that a bit and go, what are the benefits? Well, the benefits are that if the body doesn't have to metabolize incoming fuel, incoming food sources on a consistent, regular basis, it has time to do things that aren't normally prioritized. And so that's the interesting thing with the autophagy processes that include cellular, like stem cell regeneration all through the gut lining and the gastrointestinal tract, that really with the physical manipulation that happens with incoming food just doesn't have a chance to occur. So it's pretty interesting and only really happens during, extended times without eating. Okay. So when we're looking towards autophagy and we see some of these studies that point towards, 24 to 48 hours to get to an autophagy source, a key component there is to remember that those were mice studies. So that doesn't directly relate. We don't have a lot of really, really solid, good, autophagy studies in humans. They're there, but they're not necessarily using strict fasting protocols and measuring a very objective thing that we can kind of point to. So we're still on the lookout for good studies like that. But when we talk about mice, it's important to realize that if you took metabolism per gram, like the speed of their metabolic rate per gram of body weight, it's about 7 times faster than a human's. So the
It's
interesting
like
thing
the
there,
dog years thing to me. I'm like, my
kind of
brain
like
doesn't compute this.
yeah, kind of like dog years. So like mice minutes or mice hours or mice days, and versus humans. So we don't really know if it takes 7 to 14 days for autophagy to peak in humans, but it is worth noting that it probably takes somewhere north of whatever it takes for a mouse to get to their peak level of autophagy. And so that may be why Walter Longo's some of his early research showing that a 7 or a 10 day water fast once a year was a very, very beneficial therapeutic cellular, like, cleansing, reducing the risk of lots of issues, including certain types of cancers too. It can it that kind of makes sense, to me on an intuitive level, even though we don't have great data to kind of back that up, equating mice to humans, obviously.
Yeah, and that's kind of so, and that's kind of the crux too, because it's like 12 to 36 hours to deplete your glycogen, your stored
Hmm.
glucose, right?
Sure.
Insulin to
Yeah.
come down.
Hmm.
Then you're going to mobilize fat. And it's not like a light switch, it's like a slow, gradual increase, just like that
Exactly. Yeah.
transition from glycogen to ketones, where you get that keto transition, you get dizzy, fatigued, hungry, you want to break your fast, you get, mood
Hmm.
swings, you get gut
Electrolytes go
changes.
low.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Brain fog kind of stuff will happen. And so Dr. Sarah Gottfried, she talks about this as like, that's why there's this kind of sliding scale. And she looked at that men tend to produce ketones sooner than women do, which I found interesting.
Hmm.
And then there's other research that shows, this is the mice study, that takes about 24 hours of fasting to trigger autophagy and about 48 hours to peak.
Hmm.
There's really no conclusive studies in humans, but even just a simple caloric restriction can induce autophagy.
Sure. Yeah.
So, one of the registered dietitians that was quoted in the article, Whitney English, she believes it probably takes longer, which is why she chose her 3-day water fast. So once you do
Yeah.
this more consistently, then, and what we call fast cycling, you can grab, we have some concepts of what that looks like inside the Blueprint to Fasting for Fat Loss. You can grab that in the show notes. It's a free 20-page PDF. It shows you like a 4-week schedule. You're going to start to feel and be able to interpret those your body's signals, right?
Hmm.
Because one of the things that we talk a lot about is water fast versus like a bulletproof coffee or 0-calorie beverages or a bone broth fast, or what should my ideal fasting length be? That's why when people ask us what's the best fast, it's like, well, what's the one that you can stick to and repeat consistently?
Hmm.
What's the best workout? The one you're going to do. What's the best way to eat? The one that you enjoy and can stick to. Like if I'm a carnivore and you ask me to tell me I need to go vegetarian, I'm going to be like, nah, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, there's this
But it's
personal,
healthy, Scott. But it's healthy for you.
but it's
Like,
healthy,
no,
right?
that's not who I am. That's not what I'm going to choose, right?
Right. It's
And so,
personalized.
yeah. So moving the pieces around that make sense towards your long term goals within what's acceptable for you, right?
Yeah, and that's why it's like, all right, well, so that's why we talk a lot in our challenges coaching. We personalize it to you. We give you the nuance and the thought process on, okay, how are you going to pivot the schedule? What do you prefer, breakfast, lunch, or dinner? How are your results with doing OMAD dinners? Where are you at in your process, right? Well, what about cream in my coffee? So there was an interesting conversation here about, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so maybe you should say it. But it's this concept of fasting with about 300 calories, like this whole bulletproof coffee, modified ADF thing.
Yeah, there's Buchinger fasting. I believe is one of the terms that that people will
I
use.
would have blown that out of the water. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can kind of get into this realm of like almost fasting. It reminds me of fast mimicking.
Yeah.
Or we've seen some marketing campaigns
Like
that were like,
Prolon and that kind of stuff.
yeah, and then there's some other ones too that were like fasting with food, and you go, wait a minute, that feels like an oxymoron. But at the same time, I get it, and that's similar to a very low calorie diet, a VLCD, which you'll see cited in the research as well. That might be sub 1,000 calories, or even sometimes sub 500 calories. So there's it's not all black and white. It's not all on or off. But when we see descriptions of something like that, it reminds me of like you said, like bulletproof coffee and other things that could be keto hacks or calorie hacks or almost fasting hacks, if you will, too. And we've heard them described like that. But uh, you know, when we bring things into our fasting and go, okay, now I'm still fasting, and it can kind of start with a little bit of cream in my coffee. It's easy for that bucket to expand. And that's part of the issue, because if you're trying to burn through long-term fat stores, you're still going to be doing that, but you're going to start sending mixed signals to your endocrine system. And that's problematic because hormones always win in the end. And if you're sending mixed signals to your hormones, okay, are we fat burning or are we not? Well, sometimes we are, but it's not really consistent because I have these other things coming in sporadically throughout the day, or maybe from time to time. So the more often that's happening, the more likely it is that you start adding in more things, or they happen more often, and it kind of can become a slippery slope. So I like to keep those lines as clean as possible so we minimize these fasting slippage points. As we experience more fasting slippage, our results tend to slip as well over time. And then we can kind of paint ourselves into a corner of frustration, question marks, and then confidence comes down, as well as trust with ourselves and our own self-measurements of compliance and actually just how well we feel like we're doing with our own program and what makes sense for us. And that can lead to erosion of strength of mindset, which then slows down progress, can lead us to plateaus. And we're like, I don't know, I've been doing a lot of the fasting stuff, but maybe it's not really working for me. Well, if we look at all the pieces and we go, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why that might be the case. So I'd like to avoid the slippery slopes as much as possible.
And I mean, I guess that's really the whole purpose of this, is like finding what's going to work for you, what's going to work for you long term. And there was a review done by Dr. Varaday in 2023, and she looked at analyzing 8 small studies on water fasting and Bushinger fasting protocols lasting 5 to 20 days to summarize the effects. Now, if I look at benefits of fasting, I mean, you can just look at our podcast, library. It's reduce blood glucose, reduce insulin, increase ketone, promote autophagy, moderate weight loss, lower blood pressure, improve markers of glycemic control, insulin resistance, visceral adiposity, triglyceride levels, HDL,
sleep quality,
cardiometabolic markers, inflammation. It just keeps going on and on and on and on. And the benefits, and a lot of those are in studies that have a higher standard American diet, kind of carbohydrate laden 50 to 55%. Along with, shorter intermittent fasting windows. We're talking, 12, 14, 16, 18, maybe 24 up to 36 hours. So there's benefits that you'll see without weight loss of sticking to a fasting regimen.
Oh, hold on. My testosterone is probably triple what it was from 6 years ago when I had 60 additional pounds to lose. And I mean, that, for me, that's a completely different energy level and feeling from day to day. Like that's a different life and lifestyle, right there, and not one that's oftentimes talked about.
Yeah, and I want to poke holes in this. I love that the studies were done. She was looking at these studies because she's like, well, I mean, do they keep the results?
Sure.
I'm like, all right, well, do you only save money one day a week, one day a month? Do you only brush your teeth once a week? Do you only exercise once a month? No, I mean, it's going to work if you keep doing it, right?
Sure, yeah.
So she was looking at
sporadic effort, sporadic results, right?
Yeah, exactly. So did it, and there's this concept, and we've talked about this from Maurice Breckley in 2021 when the research came out, and this is how we built our programs, is that there's an identity shift that needs to take place for long-term weight loss results. Anyone can lose weight at any given point, significant amount of weight. It's whether or not you can keep it off. And the research shows between 2 and 3 years, it's only about 5% of the population. We're not saying weight loss is the only goal, right? But it is the driver towards results, towards motivation, towards excitement, towards a lifestyle adaptation or a lifestyle change. So you need to have that to get the downstream health benefits or long-term downstream health benefits. So she wanted to look at these different protocols because it looked at fasted for people who fasted for 4 or 5 days lost about 4 to 6% of their weight. Those who fasted for 7 to 10 days lost about 2 to 10%, and those who fasted for 15 to 20 days lost 7 to 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And here's her statement. However, I just lost it. Hang on, where is it? Oh, she stressed, however, that my overall conclusion is, I guess you could try it, but it just seems like a lot of work, and all those metabolic benefits disappear.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're on your diet for one day, and you're off your diet for the next day. What happens to the results you got? They disappear.
Sure.
So there's no need to be doing these 5-day, 7-day, 10-day, 20-day fast frequently.
But what if you took one of those 5-day fasts and you followed it up with a week of OMAD and then maybe a week of TMAD, right? And so you could continue with the fasting process in a way that there is a built-in caloric deficit if fat loss is your goal, and then followed up with a little TMAD to maintain those results where you're bringing in, your full amount of calories that you need and nutrition. And then are you going to see as volatile or as much volatility in the scale? Definitely not. But you go into a 5-day fast and you say no to everything for 5 days, and then all of a sudden you jump back in and you're right back to old habits, especially if you were on the weight regain train or on the weight gain train before the 5-day fast. Or if I'm going right back to what I was doing before, the results are going to go right back to whatever they were before. That's just how it's going to be. And like water is very, very heavy. So when we talk about early glycogen loss during a longer extended fast, what left very quickly will come back very quickly too. You don't necessarily have to see it all come back, or definitely not all at once. But if you go right back into bigger, more carbohydrate rich meals, it can only take a couple of days for that to come right back onto the scale. So if the goal was quick weight loss, then those results can be very, very fickle. So I completely understand where these folks are coming from. But I think that the intention behind a longer fast and then the follow-up, which is arguably one of the most important parts that's oftentimes not talked about, what you do after that long fast matters so much. And that's oftentimes ignored by these kind of commentary right here.
So we can agree that there's incredible benefit to fasting outside of weight loss, right?
Of course.
We can agree that it needs to be personalized and customized. We can agree that it's great for people that have insulin resistance, weight loss resistance, or some visceral fat or fat to lose around the waist, hips, thighs, etc.
Which is most people now.
Which is most of the population, right?
Right.
So if you are a lean individual, Thomas DeLauer and his 16-pack, I'm not jealous, I'm just observing. He lives in a very lean state.
Yeah.
My wife just had a conversation we're going to talk about. She's like, yeah, I want to do some fasting. And I was like, oh, cool. She's like, yeah, my friend said, she had mentioned Mindy Pels. And I was like, yeah, great.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, but I can't figure out how to, when I'm in the clinic on Mondays and Wednesday nights, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, what's your goal with doing the fasting? And how long do you want to start? She's like, I don't know, 12 to 14 hours. And I'm like, okay, we can start there. So I was a little hurt at first. I'm like, what? You had to hear your friend mention Mindy to say, hey, I'm going to start fasting?
Of course. Yeah, that's how it goes.
I'm like, oh, there's a funny joke from back in the day that I used to put avocado. I drank the same smoothie for 6 years when I was in clinical practice, almost every morning. I'd make 2 of them every morning. I'd bring one, and then I'd have one about mid shift in between seeing patients.
Mm-hmm.
And I always put avocado in it. It made it creamy, kept me fuller longer. So I was like, put avocado in your smoothie, put avocado in your smoothie. She never did it. She went to CrossFit one day. The owner of the gym or friends with him said, hey, yeah, I put avocado in my smoothie. She came home. She goes, hey, I bought a bunch of avocados. I'm going to start putting them in my smoothies. I'm like,
yep.
Okay. My point of bringing this up is that that personalization or that customization, she's lean. She has visible abs. She doesn't have any visceral fat. She has a very systematized tracking and follow-up and nutrition protocol she follows, and that works for her. But she doesn't fall into the normies category, right?
Right. Right.
I get results by doing a fasting lifestyle. Like we have a date night coming up, and I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna eat tonight. She's like, why? I'm like, because I just need to do a little reset. I'll go out, have fun. Like alcohol is not part of the question. So it evolves over time.
Sure.
Some of you need more consistency. Some of you need more of that customization. Some of you just need to do a damn longer fast and break the chains and
Yeah.
break the cycle. So, Tommy, let's talk about, as we wrap up, practical tips to make it easier if you decide to push your fasting windows or try a longer fast, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think start with the intention behind it. Like you just mentioned, what was her intention behind that fast? The same thing goes for a longer fast, and I'll argue that it's even more important because the longer you plan to go for your fasting period, the more likely it is that you'll have those moments of potential, emotional state or frustration, or maybe some hanger kicks in, maybe there's a craving, maybe there's a fear of missing out an opportunity that you said no to, or maybe that doesn't come up all that often and you consider changing the plan in the moment, which again can fall into that category that I mentioned earlier of slippery slope. How often are you changing the plan in the moment and kind of freelancing? That can be very, very problematic because it breaks trust with yourself, and that erosion over time leads to less confidence whenever you say, yeah, I want to do something. You don't necessarily have the same level of confidence that you'll be able to pull it off. So start with the intention behind the fast, because that's really going to determine how how attached, how emotionally ingrained with this fasting intention are you, and that's going to make it that much easier to successfully pull it off and go to the finish line. And I'll encourage you to go deeper than just seeing a new number on the scale, because you might see a new, like a tick down mark, but again, easy come, easy go, especially with a longer fast. So don't expect that number to just stick around, but then also give some thought to what's your fast going to be after this longer fast too, because I'll argue that the importance of that is just as
Keeping
important.
the benefits of your fast, right?
Right.
How do you keep
Right.
them? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's important to insulate, to protect your mindset as well coming out of that fast.
Yep. So a few categories of things. I don't want us to talk specifically about the difference between men and women in terms of when is the best time to plan a longer fast.
Hmm.
So you want to plan your fast for a period of lower stress and more flexibility, because higher stress, higher ability, poor sleep, sleep deprivation, we know that messes with blood sugar regulation the following day up to 2 to 3 days. Um, that stress response is going to make doing a longer fast more difficult, right? You want to shift to making sure that you're not trying to PR or doing these high intense long workouts, right? So back off on the intensity of your workouts.
For
Do
sure.
some more walking, some more yoga, some more gentle stretching, some more restorative type stuff. If you're going to do a longer 5, 7, 10-day fast, etc.
Yeah.
I'm just listing these off. You can come back to them. Then we want to prioritize
Yeah.
hydration. We want to make sure 20% of our hydration comes from food. So if you're not eating, we need to be adding in trace minerals, using healthy salts like Redmond's or Himalayan salt, elements, electrolyte stuff. You want to be making sure that you're prioritizing your hydration, because you aren't going to be getting that water from food, and you're going to also have diuresis take place. So you're going to be flushing out the electrolytes when the insulin comes down, because it tells the kidneys to get rid of the excess water, which is that whoosh you'll see on the scale.
Hmm.
Well, caffeine, for me, I wouldn't try cutting out caffeine if you're a caffeine drinker. I would just be aware of how it makes you feel.
Hmm.
And then to your point, Tommy, make sure that you've got a plan going in and out of your fast. So eat more protein and fat, less carbs, less buffet style, less alcohol on the front end,
Hmm.
and then plan to do the same thing of optimizing protein on the coming out of it, so that you can increase that insulin sensitivity and blunt those blood sugar spikes.
Yeah. And one thing that we hear from a lot of folks going into some of their first extended fasts are things along the lines of trying to fuel up for the longer fast. And I'm going to encourage you that that's the exact opposite of that mentality that you want going into the longer fast, because there's not going to be a way to fuel up for the fast, and that's not the purpose of it either. So in fact, as those last couple of meals before a longer fast come up, a little bit smaller of meal will actually serve you even better, because that'll make the transition going from burning through that last meal and then transitioning into your longer term fat stores. That will make that transition that much more comfortable and a little less of an extended period of time. So, avoiding that kind of question, or how do I go about doing that before, when preparing for the fast, will serve you as well. And then I wanted to say one thing about the exercise component that you mentioned, which would be going into the longer fast. If you have certain times that you dedicate to certain physical activities, exercise, even if you are making some changes to like cut down on the intensity of your exercise, which I think is a great idea, probably thinking about half of the normal intensity that you do, or maybe even less than that. Don't put away exercise altogether. So I would keep those same blocks of time that you're used to, just pivot the actual exercises that you're doing, or the intensity of them. So it feels like the schedule doesn't really change. It feels like the habits don't really change, but maybe just the implementation of what you're doing during those times to kind of optimize along with your longer fast, if that makes sense.
It does, for sure. That's one of the most common things we hear, and we talk about this on day 6 of our challenge. We go into things that drive insulin resistance or limit your results, and sleep and stress and exercise, ironically, is one of them. So the last thing I want to mention is that stress component, right? So plan your fast for a period of lower stress or more flexibility. Specifically for women, fasting so just a couple of things from big picture. Typically, when men fast within 18 to 24 to 36 hours, our parasympathetics will kick in, and we'll feel a lot more calm, or that euphoric type feeling. If you're extending your fast for the first time, women sometimes can have more of a sympathetic response. Their HPA axis survival mechanism kicks in. So we want to make sure that we are supporting the hormones and estrogen and progesterone with doing longer fasts or fast cycling, right? So when we look at the hormones, we'll keep it really simple. We want to make sure that if we're going to plan for a longer fast, that we want, or if you have that anxious, stress, lack of sleep feeling, if you try to go overnight without food, right, for the first few times you do it, that you're really prioritizing protein, and that you're going to fast strategically depending on the day of your cycle. So I talk about this with my wife. She specializes in fertility. In her clinic, she sees pregnant moms. She sees, so she uses fasting in her protocols for when she has patients that have infertility or PCOS issues. So if we're looking at day 1 through 12, that's a perfect time to do extended fast in terms of a normal, regular 28-day cycle. Day 12 to 14 is where estrogen production is at its peak. So it's best not to try to do an extended fast during those times. Up to 16 hours, probably safe, depending on how you feel, right? And then day 15, 16, all the way through day 21, you should be fine. And then day 21 through 28 is when progesterone is going to peak, okay? So you don't want to be pushing your extended multi-day fast during this period as well.
Okay. One
of the caveats to this is that you're going to need to produce the natural hormones, right? So to produce the natural, how do I want to say this? Gonadotropin releasing hormone, which then regulates and functions and coordinates the cycles for the follicular phase and the luteal phase, the first half and the second half of your cycle, when estrogen peaks and then progesterone peaks. We want to make sure that we're supporting that in between. So days 1 to 12, fast. 12 to 14, hormone building. 14 to 21, fast. Day 28, hormone building. Once menses start, you're back to fasting. Okay? Those hormone building days, progesterone and estrogen, they're going to require carbohydrates. Especially if you're not fat adapted. So we're not talking about, chocolate cravings and ice cream. We're going to be talking about natural carbs, sweet potatoes, jasmine rice,
Okay, so good food choices,
starchy
natural
vegetables, Brussels sprouts, squashes, citrus fruits, hemp seeds, all that kind of stuff. So hormone building foods, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So just a caveat, if you're going to be strategically talking about how you're going to extend your fast or do longer fast cycling, those are the days you want to do it. Those are the days you want to avoid.
Yeah, I also think a good point would be look at how your fasts have gone recently, because you don't have to, go from a 16 or an 18-hour fast and jump into, a 3-day water fast. But if you feel like it's the right time and that's what you want to do, then take some of these tips and tricks, grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss, and then ramp into it. Because, it's not a race, right? To jump into that longer fast. You'd rather do it the right way than keep trying for it and missing for whatever reason. So getting some of those foundational fasts under your belt, it doesn't take that long that you could ramp up from 16 and keep going an hour longer every couple of days and work your way up into the 24 or 30-hour range. And then, doing that's going to make it a lot more comfortable to then pull off, maybe a 48-hour after that, if that's what you want to do, or maybe it's a 72-hour. And if you're not sure how to do it and you want some more help, then we'll definitely help in the challenge. This is part of what we do is learn how to ramp up into some of these longer strategic fasts so that you can continue to pull those levers if and when you want to aim towards your long-term fasting goals. So it's a really cool process, and we love helping with that.
And that's why we do it. That's why we do it live. You get access to us, question and answers, live trainings every single day. We got a replay dashboard with all the resources on it. So if you're looking for more support, want some more answers, want to extend those fasts, want to get more results, want to insulate yourself from yourself, come on in. Challenge starts tomorrow. Head to the show notes. You can find the link for that, for the registration and frequently asked questions. That is there. You can grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss. That's there as well. Tommy, appreciate the conversation, sir. We're going to push the boundaries of the fasting lifestyle this year. So great prep through December, great momentum in 2025, and just excited for the things to come. So appreciate the conversation as always, sir, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.